be doing a reading of quotations from Chairman Mao on internationalism and patriotism. It's a short book, very nice, and this is going to be a critique about it. And first off, we're going to start with his quote, which is in the book: "Every communist must grasp the truth. Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun." So true. I think today, because of liberalism in general, we forget that violence is just, at the end of the day, you could debate and have all these logical discussions as you want, but at the end of the day, violence is going to be the inevitable. And all quotes are taken from quotations from Chairman Mao, the Little Red Book. So let us begin our reading. Patriotism and Internationalism. Can a communist who is an internationalist at the same time be a patriot? We hold that he not only can be, but must be. The specific content of patriotism is determined by historical conditions. There is the patriotism of the Japanese aggressors and of Hitler. And then there is our patriotism. Communists must resolutely oppose the patriotism of the Japanese aggressors and of Hitler. The communists of Japan and Germany are defeatist with regard to the wars being waged by their countries. To bring about the defeat of the Japanese aggressors and of Hitler by every possible means is in the interest of the Japanese and the German people, and the more complete the defeat, the better. For the wars launched by the Japanese aggressors and Hitler are harming the people at home as well as the people of the world. China's case, however, is different because she is a victim of aggression. Chinese communists must therefore combine patriotism with internationalism. We are at once internationalists and patriots, and our slogan is "Fight to defend the motherland against the aggressors." For us, defeatism is a crime, and to strive for victory in the war of resistance is an inescapable duty. For only by fighting in defense of the motherland can we defeat the aggressors and achieve national liberation, and only by achieving national liberation will it be possible for the proletariat and other working people to achieve their own emancipation. The victory of China and the defeat of the invading imperialists will help the people of other countries. Thus, in wars of national liberation, patriotism is applied internationalism. So first off, my critique is at the end where it says, "Thus, in wars of national liberation, patriotism is applied internationalism." I'd like to say that first off, you can't have... this is the problem with Marxist states. They have to always expand, and they always have to be based on the nation state, the patriotism of the nation to keep the state going. So the problem is with communism is, for something that's internationalistic, equality-based, egalitarian-based, you're just going into straight-up nationalism. You're being based off of nationalism. So it shows that the Marxist theory doesn't fully work in the abstract. It needs to be built up in a nation first. Okay. What kind of spirit is this that makes a foreigner selflessly adopt the cause of the Chinese people's liberation as his own? It is the spirit of internationalism, the spirit of communism, from which every Chinese communist must learn. We must unite with the proletariat of all capitalist countries, with the proletariat of Japan, Britain, the United States of America, Germany, Italy, and all other capitalist countries, before it is possible to overthrow imperialism, to liberate our nation and people, and to liberate the other nations and the peoples of the world. This is our internationalism, the internationalism with which we oppose both narrow nationalism and narrow patriotism. So this is the thing I don't think he really gets. He has to build up in his own country to spread the revolution and to unite with the proletariat of other countries by force, but most of all by being the center of it. So you're not really unifying, you're just becoming the dominant head of it, which is what we saw in the Warsaw Pact. And of course, one of the reasons why China in the 60s with the Soviet Union split was because who's going to dominate the communist bloc in Asia? Is it going to be China or the Soviet Union? And the Chinese refused. Mao refused it. And I think that's what Mao doesn't get. He doesn't understand that you are being narrow. You are being very narrow. It's saying that we must unite. But first off, we have to become the national head blocks for it to expand internationally. And I think another thing he's talking about here is that the spirit of communism is internationalism. You can't separate the two. And I think all internationalists, for example, neoliberals, neocons, they're both internationalists. If you are an internationalist, you are coming from a communist perspective. You're not fully against communist ideology. So, and he's right there. We have to know that Marxism, its spirit is internationalism, and that spirit will continue to survive wherever that may be. So, let's move on. The people of the countries in the socialist camp should unite. The people of the countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America should unite. The people of all the continents should unite. All peace-loving countries should unite, and all countries subjected to the United States aggression, control, intervention, or bullying should unite, and so form the broadest united front to oppose the American imperialist policies of aggression and war and to defend world peace. So, there is something about that I think he's actually right on, and it's simply this: you can't keep on doing internationalist policies or interventionist policies. You can't be what we see with both neocons and neolibs, who are really Democrats and Republicans are both one party on this. Intervention and support for Israel. Let's defend all the countries that philosophically agree with us, even against our own people. So I think Mao was right there that, though of course he calls for, I think he's right that countries will form coalitions against a country that's getting too threatening, getting involved with all the domestic interventionist policies. So I think he's actually spot on about this. But saying, of course, there's historical examples like Napoleon Bonaparte is a very good one about coalitions fighting a so-called imperialist aggressor. Mao would probably call it. But I think he's wrong here where he's like, we should all unite. No, I think he doesn't get it that after you defeat U.S. imperialism, they're all going to go their own way. And then, again, you're going to have to apply your nationalistic pressure based in your own country, as he said, to apply it internationally. So, after American imperialists are defeated, I don't think he doesn't get this, that all you're going to do is you're going to force them to be part of your international coalition after the Americans are defeated. So, I think he's wrong there, but we'll move on. Thus developed ceasingly, it is only 45 years since the revolution of 1911, when the monarchy was overthrown, but the face of China has completely changed. In another 45 years, that is, in the 21st century, or 2001, China will have undergone an even greater change. She will have become a powerful socialist industrial country, and that is as it should be. China is a land with an area of 9,600,000 square kilometers and a population of 600 million people, and she ought to have made a greater contribution to humanity. Her contribution over a long period has been far too small. For this, we are regretful. But we must be modest, and not only now, but 45 years hence as well. We should always be modest. And in our international relations, we Chinese people should get rid of great power chauvinism, resolutely, thoroughly, wholly, and completely. And I think he's very right on here. You should be modest and humble in both your daily life and even in international relations. You shouldn't be. I think he's very correct here that modesty is a very good thing. Attention's not a good thing. And the best thing you could do is to be resourceful and actually get your country on track, which he's saying here. However, I think he's wrong that today, let's backtrack there. He says this, in another 45 years, that is, in the year 2001, or the beginning of the 21st century, China will have undergone an even greater change. Boy, was he right. Very right. Very right. When you see China in 2001 and compare it to when he died in 76, changed greatly. And when this was written, or this quote was written in 1956, yeah, a lot of things have changed. However, I would say that he's made a mistake here, or really, the Communist Party in China has not kept up to his rejection of great power chauvinism, because now, in the second decade, or the ending second decade of the 21st century, we're beginning to see a great power China make moves on the world stage. And they are doing what Mao said you should do, which is to apply internationalism based on your national unification, and then apply it internationally. And I think he's got some validity there. You can't really separate. I shouldn't say you separate, but there is a close connection with nationalism and internationalism in your area and how you apply it in your international domestic policy. Your foreign policy. So, he's very valid there, and I do think he should be addressed. Okay. The socialist countries are states of an entirely new type in which the exploiting classes have been overthrown and the working people are in power. The principle of integrating internationalism with patriotism is practiced in the relations between these countries. We are closely bound by common interests and common ideals. This was from a speech at the meeting of the Supreme Soviet of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics in celebration of the 40th anniversary of the Great October Socialist Revolution, November the 6th of 1957. So, I think he's right there that countries that are tied together by common ideals and interests are going to work with each other and be united. And in this case, he's talking about the Soviet bloc before the split. So that would be, actually, for the 50s, the entire communist bloc was really united. It isn't until around Khrushchev when things begin to change. And I think he's totally right on that, because we see with the neocons and the neoliberals, they totally do the same thing. They always shill for Israel. Sometimes the neoliberals will shill for Palestine. They'll shill for NATO. They'll shill for whatever gets America stuck, financially in ruin, and dead soldiers and dead men and women coming back in body bags in the foreign policy. And it's all based on internationalism. It's not based on national interest. There's no national interest in Palestine or with Israel or NATO anymore. So I think he's right there that I think here in America we need to kick out neocons and neolibs out and end that now, because he's talking about your internationalism with your patriotism in your foreign affairs. You have to choose internationalism, and I think we've seen that too much, and that needs to go away. We need to stop that immediately, because it's not doing any good for the United States of America, or any Western country for that fact. Okay, another part. In the fight for complete liberation, the oppressed people rely first of all on their own struggle, and then, and only then, on international assistance. The people who have triumphed in their own revolution should help those still struggling for liberation. This is our internationalist duty. So here we see, in fact, actually that became a policy of both China and the Soviet Union and North Korea and other Marxist states to support other pro-Marxist and anti-Western forces around the world, wherever that be in Palestine, Angola, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Korea, Greece. And we should remember that a communist does have an international duty. As Lenin, not Lenin, but Leon Trotsky always thought so, which was to keep spreading the revolution everywhere, wherever that may be. Militarily, Leon Trotsky failed. But however, it seems here that Chairman Mao is really kind of following the Soviet model on, well, we gotta, after we fight for our liberation, we have to go expand that and keep supporting. That is our international duty as communists. Which shows that, again, I think he's totally wrong here. That you're not really liberating those people. All you're doing is you're taking your international Marxist party of your variant and just giving money for those who support you, and then putting your power and interest over them for your own benefit. So, for example, if the Chinese communists go and send weapons to a communist insurgency in Ethiopia, and if that communist insurgency in Ethiopia wins, the Chinese aren't going to unite with them out of friends. They're going to use them for their own interests. So, this is what I think Mao doesn't get or understand. Or if he does understand, he's just hiding it. Which, I don't know if he's doing. I wasn't there. Don't know. But that was from his talk with his African friends. Okay. Let's read the last part. We must never adopt an arrogant attitude of great power chauvinism and become conceited because of the victory of our revolution and certain achievements in our construction. Every nation, big or small, has its strong and weak points. And this was the opening address at the 8th National Congress of the Communist Party of China. Again, China has already just adopted a great power chauvinism. So Mao's policy or view that should not be, the party is ultimately backtracked. He's right. Every nation does have a small and weak, strong points and weak points. Everyone's got them. China has it. For example, of course, China, its strong point is it has a lot of manpower and it has a lot of funding. But the problem is its currency isn't very good, and also its rivers, its two rivers, the Yangtze and the Yalu River, aren't really they're not very clean, and they could be very blockaded, which would mean the Chinese would starve. So every country's got strong points and weak points, and you have to address them both in your domestic and foreign policy. So that is the entire chapter, Patriotism and Internationalism. And to me, that is the most important chapter of Mao's Little Red Book. I do suggest you pick it up just to understand a little bit of Marxism, of the Chinese variant. I do know that, as you can see on your screen, Xi Jinping has started his own new little book of quotations from him, of his speeches and his talks at the Communist Party congresses. And so he's coming out with that because he's trying to rebuild the Chinese Communist movement. And they're two volumes now. The new one's just recently come out. The first one started in 2014, and the book is called The Governance of China by Xi Jinping. And so I think we see that though China has done some things that go against Mao's ideals in his Little Red Book, not the founder of Chinese Marxism, but the one who brought it into action and of its main philosophical thought, but ultimately they can't get rid of them. They have to go back to it. I do know in China they have cheap copies of this book, of the Little Red Book, so I do suggest you pick it up. Very cheap on eBay and Amazon. But for a final criticism, I'd like to say that, as a non-communist, that Mao's very wrong here. Or really, communist thought is really wrong here. You cannot in any way spread the revolution without building it, as Stalin said, socialism in one state. Which I think is correct, because if you're trying to build any movement, and you want to expand it internationally, it always has to come from the home front, and then you have to build it from there and spread it, build up its military power, its financial power, and industrial might. And so, this idea that, well, this is our internationalist duty, yeah, it is, but it's the duty for yourselves. Again, the other problem is they're treating as if national identities don't really matter. As if, well, if we continue with our international spreading, that, well, all these things will go away over time. Which is the utopian ideal of Marxist thought. Which, by the way, hasn't happened. And this is where I'd say they're also wrong. That, look, when you're spreading internationally, to be the vanguard of that movement, to write its philosophy down, or its state theology, to defend its interests military and politically and financially, you have to become the defender of that ideology everywhere, not just in your own home country. So if China is the only Marxist state left around, and you want to spread it, let's say India goes communist, thanks to the Chinese are going to have to be the overlords of that system, of communism in India. They have to be protectors, finance it, help it, give it troops, give it aid. And most of all, in smaller, weaker countries like, let's say, Mongolia or North Korea, they just become the heads of it who run it. They really become the ones who, not publicly, but run it behind the scenes. So, all it is really just, I hear other communists attack communist China and say all it is just Chinese imperialism. Which I would say, there you go, there's your problem right there. When you're trying to expand the system, you're becoming just another group of imperialists. You're going against your own philosophical thought. Which means two things. Either you have to reject internationalism. By the way, that also means you're going to have to leave communism and go into the third ideal area. You're going to have to go into National Socialism or Fascism or Distributism. You're going to have to go into a nationalistic identity. So there, you just have to leave that. Or you admit that you're imperialist and you're nationalist. Which again goes into fascism and National Socialism. So it's, again, I think Mao's very wrong here. Also, you're not going to be able to unite with the Italian proletariat because the Italian proletariat are going to want to be based on their own nationality. They're not going to want to be guided, take their philosophical ideas and roads from China. No, they'll do their own. That's why, that's one of the reasons why communist Albania became its own independent communist state. It didn't want to follow the Chinese variant and be bossed around by the Chinese or the Russians. It did not want revisionism. And so Enver Hoxha was like, fuck it. We're going to be our own Marxist state. We can't always be taking orders from Moscow and Beijing. We got Triana. We got our local area. We'll just deal with it how we want to deal with our own culture. Which, again, I think really Mao doesn't, or all communists don't really get. You have to go to your culture. And from there, it's not going to work. It's not, because you're going to be leaving Marxist ideals of the internationalist sense and going into the pro-national sense that is advocated by right-wing groups. Monarchy, fascism, National Socialism, Trousserism, and many of variants of the third way. So, at the same time, he is right that internationalists always have a duty to do international things. And it doesn't have to be Marxist. It's neocons and neoliberals who are left-wing, who actually agree with a lot of ideals of Marxist philosophy. Or at least were Marxists when they were young. But, I just want to say I'm going to be doing more videos on the Little Red Book. More readings and more criticism and more analysis. There's going to be a video dealing with unity and discipline. One of the two chapters I like the most. And then finally, it's going to be between imperialism and all reactionaries are paper tiger, or socialism, communism. So look for that. I say about 2 weeks from now. Sadly, I'm not very good with videos or audio, and so I'd say if anyone's watching, please help. Please send me a message. And finally, questions and comments, I'll read them at the bottom. Please write them to me. So this is the Fascist Art signing off.